This market update is brought to you by Mercaris. Mercaris is the nation's leading market information service for organic and non-GMO agricultural commodities. At Mercaris.com, you can find up-to-date information on market conditions for organic and non-GMO commodities, including import and export information, acreage and production estimates, and timely commodity pricing information. Visit Mercaris.com for more information. Or for agricultural producers, visit Mercaris.com/farmer to sign up for Mercaris' free farmer plan.
Hi, this is Ryan Koory, the Director of Economics here at Mercaris, with your monthly market outlook for the U.S. organic commodity market. Starting off, looking at weather and crop condition across the United States. Looking at the data provided by the U.S. Drought Monitor, things have dried out quite a bit over the past month compared to where we were looking over the first part of June. We talked about the southern Great Plains last month looking pretty dry, and we've seen a continuation of that trend. In the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, northern New Mexico, and southern Colorado, we continue to see lots of counties with D2 and D3 drought ratings. Looking at central Kansas, we actually saw some improvement over the past month due to some rains coming through towards the end of June. However, western Kansas remains pretty dry, and the drought conditions have actually started to emerge more in eastern Kansas, pushing into Missouri. If we look more north and east, moderate drought conditions have started to establish themselves in Nebraska and well into western Iowa. And really, this is kind of a trend we're seeing across the U.S. Corn Belt and into the northeastern section of the U.S. Currently, we're seeing pockets of drought emerge across Minnesota and Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and all the way up into Maine. If we look back at June, what we see is a pattern of lower than average precipitation that stretches all the way from the southwestern U.S. across the Corn Belt and all the way into Maine. Overall, at this moment, we're still looking at a pretty good corn crop. Looking at the crop conditions rating from the USDA, Texas, Colorado, Kansas are all looking pretty rough at the moment, with the percentage of corn rated good to excellent at 53% or lower. Also, if we look at Michigan and Indiana, the percentage of corn rated good to excellent is also sitting pretty poor at just 51 and 59% respectively. But on a national level, we here at Mercaris estimate that the U.S. organic corn crop is at about 70% good to excellent, which is about even with the 5-year average. Right now, the question really is about rain. Weather patterns are pretty well stuck with above average temperatures, and we're starting to see some pockets of pretty heavy rainfall hit here and there. For the rest of July and August, we're at the point where we really need to watch for some more precipitation, as there's a lot of places that are doing okay at the moment, but they're starting to trend much drier and much warmer. And if we see this trend escalate and push into August, we could really start to see the crop condition, the crop outlook change over the next several weeks.
So, Ryan, sounds like we're at a real critical point right now in the corn crop. And I know there have been some timely rains here this last week, but we are moving in back into some heat this week. So how is this year's crop shaping up to compare to 2019, and what's your outlook at this point?
Yeah, if we look back at 2019's corn harvest, it did catch us a little bit off guard. I'm sure none of us have forgotten just how wet last year was. And with that wetness, we definitely saw yields and we saw planting get cut pretty severely. On a per operation basis, we saw fewer corn acres go in and get harvested, and we saw lower yields as well. So if you look at what's going on this year with these drier patterns emerging, it's kind of an opposite story. We've definitely seen much better planting this year than we saw last year. And last year's corn crop was better than we had expected because we had pretty substantial growth in the number of organic operations in the U.S. So if you have more organic farms and they're putting in corn acres this year, and you've got better planting, that alone creates the opportunity for more corn to be harvested this fall. Now, if we add to that the prospects of some drought conditions developing here and there, you could start to see some regions of the U.S. where corn production might actually just tighten up a little bit this year compared to last year. But I think that's going to be really regional, and it's really going to be dependent on that rain condition that we get over the next several weeks. Right now, on a national average, we're pretty well set to see more corn harvested this year than we did last year, and that could create some downward pressure for prices by the time we get to this fall. But again, kind of taking that little bit deeper look and looking, on a area by area basis, there is the chance that we'll see some areas continue to trend a little bit drier, and that could cut into this year's corn harvest. Next, talking about what's going on in the U.S. organic livestock sector, the big news that we saw coming out of June is that organic broiler slaughter was up month-over-month again. We estimate organic broiler slaughter reached about 4.66 million head in June, or up about 12% year-over-year. Now, with those June numbers, one thing to keep in mind is that June this year did have a couple of more slaughter days than June of last year. We had about 24.5 slaughter days this year compared to about 22.5 last year. But even if you adjust for that difference in slaughter days, we're still up about 3% year-over-year for the month of June. And that 3% higher month over month is interesting because it's a continuation of that trend that we saw at the end of May. And with this improvement in June and the better end of May, we've almost made up entirely for the drop-off in slaughter we saw from March and April following the outbreak of COVID and the U.S. shutdown as a result. Right now, overall, we're likely to see the 19-20 marketing year end higher a little bit than the previous year. And we could see that actually trend even stronger if we can keep this pace up through the end of August.
Sounds like it's been a little bit of a seesaw in the organic broiler market, and with hearing slowed numbers as we kicked off with dealing with COVID, and now we're starting to rally. What's driving that rally?
Yeah, just kind of looking at 2020 so far, as you said, it's been a seesaw. If you look back at January and February this year, we were trending just a little bit above where we were last year, maybe 1% to 2%. And then once we got into March and April, as I said a minute ago, we definitely saw those numbers come down pretty substantially. If I remember correctly, I think April was down something like 24% year over year. And now we're starting to see it creep back up. And as to what's going on with that seesaw, one of the questions we have to ask is, well, over April and May, with all those birds that, according to official statistics, did not get slaughtered, where did they go? It's likely that they didn't get euthanized because I personally haven't heard widespread complaints about people having to liquidate their organic poultry flocks. They probably got slaughtered and got passed along as conventional birds just because supply chains were so messed up. Now, with June, or with the end of May and June, with seeing these numbers trend higher, it looks like the supply chain issues have been corrected. And I think what we may be seeing some signs of with these higher slaughter rates is this higher consumer demand that we've heard reported within the U.S. Essentially, one of the factors that's resulted from COVID-19 is, people aren't going to restaurants nearly as much. They're going to grocery stores. And with that increased grocery store activity, we've definitely seen and we've definitely heard that organics have actually done even better than your conventional market, primarily because we are really linked to those grocery store markets. And, we also have all these consumer perceived benefits and real benefits in terms of the healthfulness of organic foods. So I think what we're seeing here with this, again, June moving higher year over year as much as it did, is some growth in that demand and the supply chain ratcheting up to try and fill out some of that demand. If we can keep that, that escalated consumer demand, and we can keep that pushing that organic livestock number up and keep pushing some pressure on feed demand, then if we can hold this into this next harvest, or into this year's harvest and into next year, then this could actually create some positive pressure for organic commodity prices in the U.S. and turn out to be a boost for the organic sector. Looking at the U.S. import picture last month, over June, the month looked more or less like a continuation of May. Looking at the combined whole and organic whole and cracked corn import situation, we continue to trend just below last year's level, down about 6% compared to June of last year. Last month, cracked corn imports fell again for the month-over-month for the second month in a row, down about 13% for May. However, even with that monthly decline, we're still looking at a pace of imports on cracked corn that are pretty consistent with the range that we would expect at this point in the year. Similarly, organic whole corn imports continue to pull lower last month, down 25% year over year, and that's the lowest June number we have on record. But that June number is a little bit of a red herring in the sense that over this past year we've seen a change in import patterns. Where in previous years the U.S. was pretty heavily reliant on the Black Sea region for organic imports, this past year we've seen the demand pattern shift towards actually become Argentina as one of our largest suppliers. And we've imported very little from the Black Sea. With that, our import cycle is kind of matching that export cycle of Argentina, where their exports, or our imports of their organic goods tend to drop off during the summer months. And so that's really what we're seeing that drive that 25% lower year-over-year number. And, as I said, with that kind of being a red herring, if you look at the 18-19 crop year, we're actually looking to exceed that for corn and organic whole corn imports this year, despite the fact that we're having the slowdown over the summer. So overall, organic cracked corn or organic whole corn, even though they're lower, they're actually looking to trend a little bit stronger. Taking a quick look over at soybeans, what we're looking at here is essentially the path of soybeans is following the path of organic whole corn. Argentina is one of our largest suppliers, and with them slowing down, we're seeing a slowdown. But again, we're looking for those numbers to trend higher year over year by the end of the marketing year. The one thing that we're really still watching, though, on the import front is the pace of organic soybean meal imports and how they're being impacted by the ongoing COVID issue within India. With the vast majority of U.S. organic soybean meal imports originating from India and the labor and logistic issues that continue to persist within that country, we've seen imports over the past couple of months of organic soybean meal drop. Over June, U.S. organic soybean meal imports from India were down about 15% year over year. And as we look at the USDA FAS reports that are a good measure of what's going on in the port activity, they indicate that ports actually started to improve in terms of their ability to get shipments out and ability to source labor around the beginning of July and end of June. However, they're still well below where they were the year before. So with that, even if we do see an improvement over the month of July in Indian exports, those exports aren't likely to arrive to the U.S. until you get into August. And so we're kind of in this pattern right now where we expect to see those organic soybean meal imports by the U.S. remain lower year over year until we get in, at least until this fall.
So if these Indian port issues continue, are you seeing any price implications for farmers?
With as much of U.S. supply that is reliant on organic soybean meal imports, and as much as organic soybean meal imports are reliant on India, I think that's still definitely a possibility. We're in the summer months here, and India is much the same. Once we start getting back around to the second half of this year, if we start to see, COVID escalate across the globe, and following your normal seasonal flu pattern. Even though India's made some progress now, there is the hypothetical that what if things escalate there and they have to resort back to shutting things down? And if that's the case and they have to constrict port activity and they have to constrict in-country mobility, and that's something that continues, over the winter months and into next spring, well, you could see a situation in which U.S. organic soybean meal imports do remain restricted, not just through this year, but maybe into next planting. And if that's the case, that definitely creates a situation where there's that supply that we're accustomed to getting in the U.S. that just isn't going to be there. So we're going to need to source those beans somewhere, either from what do we have in our domestic stocks or by trying to find new export partners. But either way, that's going to add some extra demand pressure to the market and could lead to some stronger prices for soybeans and soybean meal here in the U.S. So wrapping up talking about the outlook for organic prices, Since last June, or since last month, we've actually seen some improvement in the U.S. price situation. For the 2-week period ending July 4th, the Mercaris Market Price Survey recorded the U.S. delivered organic feed corn price at about $8.51 per bushel, which is up about $1.50 per bushel from the start of June. Organic feed wheat markets have been relatively quiet so far this summer, but price trends are following organic corn for the most part, with the North American delivered organic feed wheat price averaging $7.43 per bushel at the start of July, up about $1 from the start of June. And finally, looking at organic feed grade soybean prices, they softened a bit actually over the month of June, averaging about $18.75 per bushel over the 2-week period ending July 4th, down about $1 per bushel from the start of June.
That's quite the bump in the corn price there. Do you have any insight as to what's causing that change?
Yeah, the little bit of rally we've seen in corn prices, I think we're hoping is an indication of maybe a little bit stronger market here in the U.S. And maybe there's a couple of things that could be contributing to that. One, we're looking at July now, so we're getting pretty far away from last year's harvest. And one of the unexpected things that we had coming out of harvest last year is U.S. organic corn markets got put in a really long position where there was just a lot more corn sitting out there than what the market had expected. Well, with the summer months, we've seen a slowdown in organic imports, following that seasonal trend, and we're getting pretty far away from that harvest. So we could start to see this could be a signal of a situation in which the U.S. market is starting to tighten up. And with that tightening, we could start to see organic corn prices maybe improve a little bit over the next month or two. With that, one of the things that we're starting to think about is, if this is a signal of a market that's tightening, and you add to that you have this weather outlook that, it is not quite as dire as what we saw last year, but it's definitely looking a little bit tenuous in places. So if you have a situation in which, you get a little bit of price support just from the natural supply situation tightening, plus the potential for the crop outlook for this harvest looking a little more in peril, does that create the situation for some persistent little bit higher prices over the rest of the summer and maybe make for a little bit better situation for new crop contracting? We don't know yet. The first couple of weeks of July have really been the first indication of stronger market prices that we've seen in a while, and it's too early to say that this is really the trend that's being set. But with those prices being higher, it's definitely something we're going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you put that right. Something to keep an eye on, a potential opportunity for farmers, and definitely something that I'm sure we'll be talking about next month. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up and really appreciate the information, Ryan, and we'll be back in August. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you as well.